All right. And we are live Tuesday, a bit after 4, as always. Welcome back to another freshly squeezed episode of Peak Ace on Air. It's sunny, 25-ish degrees, at least here in Germany, in kind of the northern parts. You can see already I'm slightly red. I got a bit of suntan. For those that are kind of watching the video, it's not me being all sweaty, but just like I got a bit of sun. So yeah, it was a good long weekend. Dominique is on her kind of well-deserved, I think at least, yeah, we probably should say that, well-deserved vacation. Fair enough. So today we have kind of another month passed. We're already early June. So we have kind of our May recap. I think we're going to talk a bit about what happened at Google's I/O conference. And so that you don't have to listen to me for like the next 45 minutes, I am actually joined by a new Peak Acer. I think that's very fitting. Hi. Munir, good to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm also very excited to be here on the show with
you.
Yeah,
very cool. Looking forward to chat a bit about the SEO things that happened in the last 4 or 5 weeks. There was a lot of things that actually kind of Google pushed out. Yeah, some really interesting things. Yeah. So that's gonna be our major topic for today. Before we get going, a couple of very quick housekeeping notes. So for those of you that are either watching later or kind of want to follow up on some of the previous episodes that we did, we had a lot about content marketing funnels in the last a couple of weeks. We have the show notes as well as kind of the video episodes at pa.ag/notes. So if you want to kind of, investigate, deep dive, follow up, whatever, then this is where you should be going. And we also, of course, going to have a recap of today's kind of things that we're going through. Normally, like the weeklies, the monthlies, for those that are familiar with it, have kind of a lot of different links because there's obviously just a lot of different things going on during a month. This one might be slightly different. There are actually two fantastic, one resource specifically kind of around all things that Google announced at I/O. I mean, not specifically I/O, but I/O for kind of SEO, if you so will. So Munir and I kind of poked around that. So we're probably gonna walk you through it because it's a really very well done and thorough write-up. Before we do that, Munir, you joined. What was it, 8 weeks ago, 3 months ago? Time is flying.
I think it's 2 months ago. So
2 months ago, right? 2 months ago.
In April.
In April, right? As one of our kind of SEO consultants. Really cool to have you on the kind of on board and on the show. So give us a 20 seconds version of yourself. What does Munir do in his free time? What does excite you?
I am excited. I find my new passion to cook Italian food.
Okay.
So
nice.
Pasta is my favorite food for the last 3 months.
Okay, so only pasta.
Yeah. only what I see. But yes, about me actually, yes, I'm in SEO for maybe 3 years. I also worked in the agency and very excited to join Peak Ace. Learned here a lot of very nice, friendly people. Everybody's very helpful. Yes, and also it's about warm weather outside. I was also on a boat.
Oh, nice.
With my friends on weekend. So
nice.
Yes, it was actually very nice because
that sounds
the weather in Berlin is not so good.
Not always, at least. That's very
not
true.
Always, yes.
That's very true. Yeah, no, really cool to have you. So yeah, Google I/O. I think, I mean, there was obviously a lot of other things that happened during the month as well, but I think I/O specifically kind of Google, I mean, similar events, right? Facebook has something, Adobe does a huge kind of show as well, but I think they kind of all, by now at least have their own kind of stage and environment for one of the kind of major or mega event where they announce a lot of things. And I think what's also important to understand for the kind of the SEOs or search industry in general, I mean, it's not only about that, right? It's also just research in general, projects that Google is kind of excited about. I saw, for example, there was one kind of, how you say, like kind of a session where they talked about a device basically that would guide people without any vision, so blind people basically, and it would enable them to actually do a run on their own. So essentially, it kind of it used like the device, I think somehow used a mechanism that would guide you on a certain line, but without any other external help. So it's super exciting. Like, it was a research project, so I kind of watched it for like half an hour or so, and I was quite impressed, I have to say, on the tech. It was like just two tiny earbuds with like some sensors, and that was basically it. So crazy stuff like that. That's what's Google kind of showcasing there primarily. However, I think, and then we can kind of go through it, but like there were also some things that really, I think some more on the short term or midterm, either way, and some really more on the long run that will have an impact on search results, kind of SEO to come, right? So I think it's a bit of both, really. So even though it's not a SEO conference in a way, or search marketing conference in a way, and actually, I mean, it's free to attend, and a lot of the video stuff is out there afterwards as well. I think it's definitely worth kind of dialing in, maybe not on everything, but because it was a huge program. But yeah, there were certainly a bunch of sessions, I think, that I found quite interesting. So Munir, was there anything where you said like, well, this kind of got me really excited, or there was a session that, well, I saw which I didn't really expect, or like from the write-ups, was there anything that stood out to you?
Yes, what I found very exciting was the MUM as a new technology from Google, because one of the most difficult problems for search engines today is to help you with complex tasks.
Yeah,
so such as planning a family outing, these often require multiple searches to get the information you need.
Yeah.
So in fact,
and context, right? I think that's the massive challenge, like having the context of something and the relation. Yeah, true.
So yes, and Google in fact finds out that people need an average of 8 search to complete complex tasks.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, I agree.
So and with this new technology called Multitask Unified Model, or short MUM, Google is able to better understand much more complex questions and needs, so that fewer searches will be required to get things done in the future.
And properly done, I think, right? This is also the big challenge. Yeah, that was I think that was a huge announcement. Kind of the I wouldn't say follow up on BERT, which would be a massive understatement, right? But I think it was something like, what did they say? Like, was it 10 times, 1,000 times?
1,000 times, yeah, 1,000 times more powerful.
Than, and I think. Yeah, so I found that, I mean, whatever that means at the end of the day, right? I mean, that shall be seen. And but I also find quite interesting with these announcements, and we can go through some of them. Like, I mean, so this is, they had their showcase, right? And that was quite fascinating, obviously. But they always show you only the cool stuff, right? I mean, it's the same with us, right? We only present the cool stuff. But like in search, there are so many crazy like edge cases where things are just going sideways, obviously, or can go sideways. Let's put it that way. So I think this is the more interesting part in the future. So like, when will we actually be seeing this in a production world? Because they are somewhat confident enough that this does actually across the board not go into the wrong direction, right? So I think this is what I find really fascinating with those announcements, because I recall when they demo like the Google Assistant, the other I/O, like, where they had this demo call where the assistant was actually booking this appointment, right? That was, I think, in the demo last time. So they had that calling this. I think it was a hairdresser, if I'm not mistaken. I can't recall. It was a hairdresser where the assistant called and kind of made this appointment. I mean, of course, it's like a fascinating tech showcase, and like everyone and their mother was like talking about it afterwards. But I mean, still, until that is in production, that's gonna take some time. So yeah, I found that really interesting actually. But yeah, Mom actually that was actually probably one of the big announcements. More so, I imagine, for kind of this search or search in the future, right?
Yeah.
But there were also some interesting topics, I think, that are more timely. So I think obviously a huge topic was around like the page experience update, and I mean specifically, well, no surprise, obviously, on core web vitals. I think one of the things that we're seeing literally every day in and day out, and even more so ever since the announcement. So that was, of course, a huge topic there as well. And I think you mentioned another topic that was there as well, which is interesting, a bit more from like another perspective, but like signed exchanges, right?
Exactly.
Give us a guess. So what are signed exchanges? Or I think what's the short acronym? It's SXG, right? Yeah, SXG, I believe.
Exactly, yes. SXG, it's so like Jeffrey Jones also announced that Google Search will prefetch websites built using signed exchange, and he said this was announced early this year, but can make a big difference to UK Web Vitals scores. So this should start in mid-July.
We shall see if that still stands, but yeah. I mean, this was the kind of unfair advantage, right? Unfair in quotation mark. That was the big thing that you would have had when you would be using kind of their accelerated mobile pages framework, right? Because following that standard would allow Google, like from the search results, and I think specifically they did that or still doing that in the news carousel, right? So like everything that was kind of included in the carousel, like the destinations, got already kind of pre-rendered or pre-fetched in a way, so that when you would click, you wouldn't have had the latency kind of when you click through, right? And that they kind of allowing this to be opened up without you using AMP, right?
Right, yes. In practice, this means that both AMP and non-AMP results may prefetch some important resources, such as HTML, JavaScript, CSS, images, or fonts in a privacy preserving way. So, but the difference to before is that the browser does not have to request these resources after clicking Google.
Right. Yeah. So you have it kind of like, it feels instant. This is basically and this is an interesting thing, right? Because what it does is, I mean, in reality, what you're optimizing therefore is you're optimizing for perceived speed, right? It's not that this thing is really faster. It's just like it feels faster because it's already there. Essentially, they put it into your browser's cache. Yeah, that's true. And I think it goes back to the change that they made already a while ago when they kind of went away from just having one performance metric towards like a set. And I think we've been discussing that in other previous episodes as well. That just one metric in a way is not good enough for like measuring the perceived like journey or like the perceived speed in a way that a site might be loading like technically very, very fast, but like you try to click, nothing's going to happen because like the main thread is busy doing some JavaScript nonsense in the background. Yeah, that was an interesting. You're right. I think that announcement was there a bit earlier, but no one really paid much attention to it because it was like very much early stage kind of draft mode. So is that do you know if like how they kind of want to roll it out? Is that done through like a library or like to just like they release a standard and that's it, or like was that specified?
Actually, I don't know exactly this part, but maybe you are also interested in it, how it works actually. So a publisher can sign a single HTTP exchange so that the exchange can be served from any caching server. So
so it doesn't need to be the AMP cache anymore. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So when the browser loads SXG, it can safely display the publisher's URL in the address bar.
Yeah, so we don't have the nonsense with the AMP cache URL anymore. I think what I saw like the other day, because I kind of was working on my SMX Advanced presentation actually for like was it 2 weeks now? Almost 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And I saw that I think Cloudflare with their the service workers, or like the workers model, not service workers, just Cloudflare workers, they kind of preparing for like signed exchanges as well. So I suppose that's just also a matter of kind of for some of the major CDN providers to just make it easier for you to kind of deal with those SXGs, because it technically, I think you need to have a bit of understanding how like the entire kind of signage process and handshake process works. I had a look at I think they launched a page on web.dev, like on the new on the site where they're kind of collecting all the performance stuff around like core web vitals and whatnot. And it is actually a fairly technical process, I have to say. So yeah. All right, so let's have a look what else kind of was there. We're gonna share the link afterwards, but I think obviously one session, and I probably can just also put it on my screen share. That makes it a bit easier. 1 second, I'm just gonna switch browsers. And then yep. So hold on 1 second. I'm very well prepared, as you can see. Where are we? StreamYard, share screen. Come on. Yep. For whatever reason, my StreamYard doesn't like the browser. Lovely. Why not? Come on. Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So basically, I think this is the one that I mentioned. Yeah. So there was a really massive kind of recap that that Olga wrote, like kind of straight after I/O, and like she went through a lot of sessions. But the kind of 4 ones that she kind of had a major look at was like new and searched, and like page experience signals, obviously web vitals, core web vitals, and like another one called the business impact. So videos are in here for you to follow up, but like there were a couple of interesting things around, again, like more the major kind of tech stack, and a couple of things that we probably should address. So one thing that I found quite interesting is that Google specifically, again, talked about HTTP2. And so HTTP2, I mean, for those that are not too familiar with the kind of performance side of things, is kind of the upgraded protocol, if you so will. Like we've been a long time using HTTP 1.1. HTTP2 is now already also a couple of years old. Google was not necessarily the fastest to kind of change over Googlebot. We are actually already in experimental stages of HTTP 3. So browsers like Chrome, Firefox, but also like the big CDNs, Cloudflare and the likes already support HTTP 3. So it's not that it's just like cutting edge, but still, like from a volumes perspective, I think for Google it does make a lot of sense. That the major difference here is that with HTTP2 you have streaming or streams where you can send like multiple files of data through without doing single connections individually. So that's just a massive performance gain, and not only from a browsing perspective for us as end users, but also from a crawling perspective, because like, well, again, you have like those bundles which make things just really fast. The other thing that I think was worth mentioning here is that I believe it was a bit further down. So let me scroll. Where was it? Yeah, that over like Google now kind of switched over to the fact that actually half of all URLs are now crawled with HTTP2. So Googlebot still kind of decides, if what kind of protocol version they are using for you. I mean, that obviously try, but still does not necessarily mean that you will be crawled on or with HTTP2, even though you are actually serving HTTP2. There's always the fallback. So it can just be that Google decides for you, for whatever reason, to kind of go with the old one. So that I found quite interesting. Progress, I would say. And then there was also a lot of talk around structured data, actually. And I found Well, this is not really surprising, right? I mean, Google has been pushing unstructured data in the last years, like massively, and I think there's few gains to be had, right? Sometimes depending on implementations, you have like highlights in the search results, or you get like specific features. Not always, right? Not everything that you implement straight away means that you have a gain. But then again, on the other hand, and I think this is what it is in reality, is like you're providing more context to meaning, if that makes sense, right? I think my favorite example from the past was always like a zip code. Not necessarily the zip code is a zip code, right? So like it can be very, very different from like country to country, and like their annotations might just be looking, well, not the same, and therefore for Google it's like really hard. The zip code is a short phone number. Is it something entirely different? So by extending your markup, you give context, and I think nowadays, I mean, it's a significant part of like what they use as data for the knowledge graph, like sometimes for like the knowledge graph panels, not always. But sometimes also what you see is like with what a lot of people don't have on their radar, it's kind of the more vertical specific implementation. So like there's schema markup for like the car industries with, I don't know, manufacturers, where you can specify that, or the make or the model, or like even the horsepowers if you're into cars, right? So like very specific. And they had actually two interesting announcements, right, on that. Did you have a look on that, Munir? I think the one thing that I found interesting was like, and again, not surprising, on video, right?
Exactly, yes. There's like new structured data markup named clip markup.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so these segments can then be shown directly in the search results. But all you need to do is provide a textual tag, a starting time, and URL.
Yeah.
So yes, it's quite interesting. So you can click it directly from the Google search.
But this is actually even quite useful, right? I mean, like I think especially on like on longer streams where you have like a lot of where you have a multitude of topics, or where you have I used to listen to quite a bit of like music on YouTube still these days, like especially from like the kind of some of the live broadcasts and whatnot. And like what you could start seeing already like a while ago is that when those artists like done a proper job, you would see like the different tracks with like different marks, right? So you could like kind of jump to the specific track already, like, but you never could do that from the search results. So I think this is just a logical next step, and I think it also goes to show how much Google really cares about video or interacting with like certain specific elements coming from the search results. So yeah, I think they call what do they call it, like key moments or something? Yeah, key moments.
Yeah,
the clip markup,
video key moments. Yeah.
Yeah, and then what else? What is the seek markup? What was that?
Yes, this is like if you cannot directly set set the time. And like if you cannot easily list the segment information for all of your videos, so this is the markup will allow Google to use machine learning to analyze content. So, but it's available in near future.
Yeah, okay, that's not there yet. Okay, I see. But the clips you can already use, right? Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the clips
interesting.
You can already use.
So that was video. Oh yeah, there's some links in here. So that was that. I think that was quite interesting. What else? Yeah, and then of course there was a lot around kind of page experience. Really, what I also found quite interesting here is that so I mean there's a strong emphasis when you kind of go through the video. I mean, a couple of things are really not surprising, right? Like in itself, like, okay, mobile friendliness, not a new topic, right? This is something that has been there literally forever. Also, like, yeah, HTTPS, not a surprise. One thing that I found quite interesting is like that there's the visual. So like, okay, understood. Security and privacy, right? So that's HTTPS and all of that. That I get that, right? And of course, like loading with the different core web vitals. I think this is also, or even web vitals, not necessarily core web vitals. This is also understood, but like there's a very strong emphasis, and they actually make it a difference even to say like user annoyance and accessibility, right? You could, I mean, if you wouldn't go overly crazy, you could also say like, okay, I mean, this is somewhat the same, right? I mean, not entirely. Don't get me wrong, but like it's not too far from each other. And I would say like, okay, if I'm one, I can also be the other. So I found it really interesting that they said, look, user annoyance is something that they kind of specifically point out here, and I think it also goes back a bit to like this entire so in the kind of search quality radar, like the guideline papers that they kind of released, over and over again in the past. I think there was always, though, I mean, there was of course always like, how can you accomplish tasks, and did that happen and whatnot. But I think there was a very strong emphasis in the just kind of the recent ones where they talk about like intent met. So essentially saying, okay, did that person, or the searcher in this case, like were they able to fulfill the task that they actually kind of set out to accomplish, right? So like they go in and could they actually do it? And I mean, annoyance, I think in various ways is really something that no matter if a site is fast or if it's secure or not, that's something that can be kind of in the way, if that makes any sense, right? So I mean, as we said, like, so loading is quite clear, but annoyance is especially, and I guess a great example here on like the interstitials situation again. So like everything that's kind of somewhat getting in your way, and that's funny, I think, but it makes sense. I mean, CLS, the shift metric, I mean, of course it's a performance metric, right? But what it does though is like I think it's more annoying than anything when elements kind of start jumping around on the page. It's not so much about like how fast does it happen, but rather like, is it pissing me off because I wanted to click on something and then the thing moves like, top or down or whatever. So I can really see on where they're coming from. And then there's like an interesting way where they talk about not only like, interstitials or intrusive, like, it can also be like those annoying cookie banners or like GDPR or, those types of things. And what I find quite interesting with this is the fact that, like, even though they're saying, look, Google or Googlebot or part of the algorithms and like kind of in the background might be able to understand, if that is a pop-up or not, or like an interstitial or like a cookie overlay. If you piss off people in a way, right, to be very, very blunt here, then that might be a problem. And that certainly kind of goes to reflect back into the algo or the algorithms in a way. It totally makes sense, but I found it quite interesting that I put like a second bucket, like a fourth bucket or pillar here, saying like putting the emphasis on that specifically. So I think that is a topic. And it's similar with Core Web Vitals, right? I think this is something that I've been saying a couple of times as well with like the set of the three metrics. It's not only that. It's really interesting. And there's a really good comment by Max, who is watching as well. It's like the focus on accessibility part is about people with disability, which is very true as well. Of course, I think accessibility is not only that, right? But it certainly is a huge part of it. I mean, it goes back to basics, I would almost say, like also proper HTML markup in a way. Let's use alt attributes for a second, or like the title attribute or anything like that. Of course, that is if I do my markup properly and I have captions in place, I have titles set, I have alt attributes set, I have a proper HTML document outline set with an like H2 following an H1 and all of those things. That's just semantics, right? And this is, well, not just, but that's kind of basics. But you're right, of course, that certainly pays back into that section as well. But I wouldn't say it's only that. You could also turn around and could say it can be accessibility for crawlers in the same way, because what you do here certainly helps the other. Both ways work out. But you're right. That's a very good point here to add. Yeah. Thanks for the comment. Appreciate it. So that's that. I think some other things that are here are really also things that kind of stand for ages, like safe browsing, right? This is something that Google tells us specifically in GSC, etc. So yeah, there was a lot of talk about that. So this is like definitely worth kind of following up. The thresholds and stuff is not really new. One thing that really made me laugh was this year. I'm kind of like, it's a bit of like the story in SEO, right? So like there's something in the past that I kind of used to use as an example, which was around link building, actually, or like specifically certain things in link building, because SEOs are really good at breaking things, also breaking things that actually work, because we sometimes, unfortunately, have the tendency as an industry to overdo certain things when they work really well, and then Google has to say like, look, maybe not anymore. So if you take that analogy, then I think one thing that happened now is like everyone was like, okay, so Google said, look, we're gonna do like all this scoring and whatnot. We gotta use like the mobile version, because mobile anything and mobile everywhere, and mobile first indexing and blah 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 blah. And I think it's too short-sighted. I think this is not really a surprise. It was absolutely bound to happen anyways. Yeah, we finally have the, I would say, official confirmation that desktop is not entirely dead yet. I guess it's similar to SEO, right? It's not it's not entirely done yet. So yeah, page experience, they kind of signaling in a way is coming to desktop as well. So that goes back to, I think, one of the slides I've been using ever since everyone was just talking about mobile. It just says like, please, I think I can like still recall like the headline out of my head, which says, please do not forget about your desktop version, which I think rings very true. So yeah, that's gonna happen. Definitely gonna happen.
I think this also makes sense, as users have different expectation when visiting a desktop page compared to the mobile page. But we don't know actually yet if the desktop update will come out at the same time as the mobile update.
Was there any time frame announced, or was there no time frame? No. Okay.
But they say that they will provide further information and documentation.
Right. Yeah, but this is like, I think when we talk about web performance testing or like optimization in general, I think like historically, I think this is actually a good point, because historically we would have only tested on a desktop with at least like those are not as experienced on that. Like they would have tested on a desktop with a cable connection, and that's it. So like then at some point we said, look, you probably might need to test on mobile with like a throttled, I don't know, 3G or whatever. So now it's a bit of the other way around. But like essentially what I'm trying to say is like, if you do it properly and you have like automated performance testing running anyways, then what you would do is you would test like different viewports, because like you have responsive sites. You would test like different connections. You would probably have even different performance budgets for those. So yeah, definitely worth kind of following up on. And then so there was another session, kind of what's new on Web Vitals. So that was quite interesting. Which also there was one chart that I liked specifically. See if I can find it. Yeah, there was a bit of clarification on like lab data, field data, and what to use when, and also because people kind of get that confused all the time. Where's this slide? Let me try to find it. Yeah. So what kind of data points do you find in which tool, and how does that all like come together? So this is like a really cool kind of follow-up for you if you kind of have to deal with web performance on a day-to-day basis. There's a really good overview on things where you can like see where does what come from, and what to use with it. So that was a lot on those topics. Munir, was there anything else in that one that you spotted where you said like this is worth mentioning?
Yes, it's also about top stories update.
True.
We said already that yes, before you have to do it with AMP, but now Google wrote in the new FAQs that AMP will no longer be required for showing up in the stories. So with the introduction of page experience update, they are also updating the top stories.
Right. That's an interesting one, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so page experience ranking is used to ensure that high quality news articles are displayed on mobile devices.
So this is why they kind of combine it, right? Yeah, but I find it still quite interesting. Like, you could also argue that, and I'm kind of curious to hear like other ones' takes on this, but like, I mean, there was always this discussion slash bias, if you so will, that people would argue that it's not really fair to be only included in the kind of the top stories, as you said correctly, if you would rely on, well, you would only be there, right, if you would kind of use AMP or rely on their technology to be included. A bit of a similar problem that we currently seeing with recipes, for example, where you have like kind of very strong kind of AMP output in a way. So I think I'm not going to go as far as say, look, this is just due to that, but I think it's certainly an interesting move to open up. Even though, of course, they were always arguing, look, we can only do it because we can't like prefetch and preload and whatnot. So now we have signed exchanges. So like it's a bit of an interesting puzzle coming together, and I'm really curious how in practice does it look like, because only because it's not required, it could still mean that Google would prefer, like if they have like, let's say they have 10 that are somewhat equal, right? And like 8 out of them are like on AMP and the other 2 are not. So does it mean it's going to be, how are they selecting that, right? Is there like, a benefit of them still having it, or is it not worth it anymore? I'm kind of curious. It's certainly an interesting discussion for like publishers to have in the future, because I know that a lot of those companies are somewhat like really, let's say, not overly happy with the fact that they have to kind of maintain like another version of their output with a different, sometimes even restricted, not always, but sometimes restricted like template. It's more maintenance. Like sometimes they need to produce content differently or on top of like the regular form articles that they would need. So like, there's a lot of those questions that are somewhat kind of come with the decision on a pro and con kind of accelerated mobile pages, yes or no discussion. So I'm like, I'm really curious on that and how that's gonna develop in the future. So yeah, I'm really curious. There's also, if we talk about, because that was the other topic that you already mentioned, and I think we probably can't have an IO session on without mentioning MUM. We talked about that, but also there was kind of a chatbot called LaMDA or LaMDA, whatever, LaMDA, where they kind of simulated, and we're gonna put it into the show notes, like where they kind of simulated a conversation basically, and it was quite funny, where basically this intelligence kind of was showing like, or was reacting as if it's like a paper plane. So that was really funny. So essentially, there's a write-up we're gonna share, but like they basically said, look, the technology was trained with a certain context, right? And that context was that the training data said, look, you are a paper plane, and then like give this entire thing a certain background to it, and then there was a question like, if where the person asked, like, look, there's a planet that was called Pluto, like does Pluto ever had like visitors? And said like, look, yeah, we had a lot of them, and actually like the most important one was like this spaceship called New Horizons that actually visited me. So it was like the write-up kind of says, okay, like it gave like very kind of honest and fitting answers, but of course what you could see here is that there's certainly a strong reliance still, of course, on the training data. So if you feed something that's entirely made up, of course you would get something out that's also entirely made up. But for the machine itself, that answer is completely logic, due to the fact, and I think that this is what the kind of the majority of the demonstration was all about, like kind of understanding context, understanding relationships, even though like if in is something that's entirely made of a fantasy, then of course like the output is the same thing. But I found that quite interesting. So like moving strong and pushing strong on like this conversational intelligence, if that makes any sense. So I'm kind of really curious to see what's gonna be happening there. And I think at the same time, what they also put a strong emphasis on is like that they updated like their AI guidelines, if you so will. So like the development of like this kind of LaMDA is like apparently closely following the kind of new and updated guidelines and regulations, because I think there's also like a lot of, and this is not really related to IO, but like there's a strong there was like some strong reactions months before on like a lot of cases where people were arguing that the training data for a lot of this stuff is already completely biased. So you would get like that you had like masculine, feminine like kind of outputs that were like mixed up, and like but of course the training like the output can only be as good as the input. So there were like a lot of changes in like this kind of ethical committees around AI. So I think this is a topic that brings in like obviously massive responsibility, and not an easy one to deal with, I would imagine. So that's a big topic. But of course, as we said earlier, I think this is opposite to the likes of Core Web Vitals, sign exchanges, top story changes. This is like very hands-on. This is very much like around the block. Most likely everything of that stuff is going to be happening sometime during this year. But the other stuff is probably a bit further down the line. Let's put it that way. But yeah, there's I'm gonna share like two of those write-ups where they have kind of the like one for LaMDA where they have kind of this conversation and like engagement with actual people. So I'm kind of curious. I think for now there's not really kind of any impact on SEO, but I think the tech itself is going to be like a huge leap kind of in the future to come. So I'm kind of curious what's gonna happen there. I think one thing, if you want to find something, what can that potentially mean? I think it goes back to something else that we have been kind of witnessing over the last month and even years. If you kind of like a bit less maybe, but still there, it's kind of quality of content and like the results of stuff that you need to produce to actually continue to rank strong in the future. Even though now there might be other signals that potentially are outweighing the others, and you can kind of get away with not amazing content sometimes, depending on industries and obviously also competition and whatnot. But I think there's a strong emphasis on really getting better quality content out there, because going forward with an X times better understanding, you might lose out. I think this is probably the most actionable thing, like a strong emphasis on continued increase of content quality. I would say this is something that if you look at it closely, this is quite clear to me. I will argue. Do you have any other kind of takes on what you've seen on the tech, Munir, or anything that you found like exciting in that regard? Or does that sum up the things quite nicely? You now you're muted.
Yeah. I was no
muted.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no worries.
No, actually, like this was some most interesting things about this book, but like maybe some users don't know, maybe they know, and the new Search Console page.
Very good point. So what happened on that front? What did they announce there?
They did announce that there are new page experience report, and this report combines the existing Core Web Vitals report with other components of the page experience signals, such as HTTPS, security.
So basically they took what they showed on the slides. Okay, you're right. That's a very good point, and that's already available, right?
It's already available.
Yeah. So if you haven't used that, certainly worth kind of investigating. I think this is also like a kind of this continued push for Google on like using Search Console as the kind of central kind of location to provide stuff, even though, and I think there's a lot of arguments to be had around like the quality of data. Still stuff is lacking kind of in APIs. So for like the power users, it still can be frustrating. I get that, but I think the guys are like trying their best as to at least kind of ensure somewhat transparency and like some continued communication with SEOs, webmasters alike. So I think this is a good trend. But I can also see the other side where people say, look, I do 3 different queries and I get 3 different types of like output. So what am I supposed to trust here? Like, why is it not possible? Even though I think the complexity of Google systems is something that most of us probably can't even imagine. So there's probably a good reason for that. I think this is probably what it is, really. All right, so we're already 45 minutes in, which is close to the 5 o'clock mark in Germany. So I'd say we're gonna call it a day for today. Really appreciate those that kind of jumped in, kind of chatted along, had a watch. For those that are kind of watching afterwards, show notes again on pr.ag/notes. There is gonna be no Peak A's on air next week, so we're gonna take a bit of a break. So that means we're gonna be back in 2 weeks' time. That's gonna be the 15th of June. Other than that, nothing changes. So for German time, on the usual channels. Munir, thank you so much for joining. That was good fun.
Thank you, Bastian. Yes,
much appreciate that.
The viewers also enjoyed.
Absolutely, and the viewers, I'm sure they do. And like, if you guys have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to us, like either on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you are, or just drop us an email. We're happy to kind of help or assist. That's it. We are off for today. See you guys in 2 weeks, and enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully get some sun once you're done with whatever you're doing. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.